Good evening, everyone. I know that this is a surprising time for me to stream this late on Sunday, but I am following through on my 2023 promise to all of you who back me that there will be more and better content on this channel all year long. And we're going to kick things off really well. We had Geo on last week, and this week we've got Paul Fahrenheidt with us to talk about his excellent new work. But before we jump into that, welcome everyone to the 72nd official episode of Eunuch Corner Club Live. And the people who make that possible are these fine folks that financially support me every month over on Subscribestar. Thank you so much. This is helping me make this my full-time career, and I love it. There will be great things to talk about tomorrow night on Discord at Dragons at 6 p.m. on my channels. I hope that you'll all be there. And of course, during this stream, we will be responding to any communication that we have from you guys. And you can send in over on Entropy. You can send your paid chats or unpaid chats on the Entropy question widget. You can also send short messages on PayPal, Cash App, and Subscribestar as well. And now that I am live on Rumble and Odyssey, you can send your paid chats over there as well. And that money comes directly to me after a small cut. So at the end of the stream, we will be answering any questions that you guys have for my wonderful guest tonight. Speaking of my wonderful guest, we're going to go ahead and bring him on right now, and you guys can enjoy partially the cover of his new book. Paul Fahrenheidt, thank you for joining me today to talk about your new work. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing very well, Yiz. Thank you very much for having me on again.
Glad to have you on again. You're always interesting to talk to, and you're one of my personal favorites that I've met in these networks that we are in. You have a good demeanor about you and a steady mind, and I'm glad to hear that you have tilted that wonderful mind of yours toward mythology and creativity to inspire others, and that's why you are here today. So you have a new book that just came out called A Country Squire's Notebook, and we're going to get you to tell us what that book is and why you made it. But first, take a few minutes, and in case people that are listening or new to my channel don't know, tell people who you are, and then a segue into why you felt like this book and the short stories therein needed to be created.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I don't like throwing out titles, but you know, I generally I just go by Paul Fahrenheit or just Paul, and I mean, I write stuff on a Substack called the Fahrenheit Family Archives. A lot of people tend to like what I throw up on there. I do audio content every now and again with my friends. I'm really active with the Old Glory Club. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the Old Glory Club is an LLC with ambitions of being something else, made up of all of your favorite American content creators and a bunch of other friends. I mean, other than that, I post stuff on Twitter and generally try to. I mean, I'd say stay out of trouble, but it seems I create more trouble than I am out of. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't exactly call myself a content creator in the sense that, like, you know, that's my full-time gig, because this is obviously not my full-time gig. But you know, I'm a personality. I like to think that pops around every now and again.
I certainly think of you as a quality personality connected to the people that care about not just our ethnos and our heritage here in America, but someone who cares about the positivity of spirit and embracing something besides the material. The things that I've heard you speak on in person and what I've gleaned from you from your Substack, I think that you're a man who has a healthy balance in mind between the material and the spiritual in life. And that comes through in the things I've read of yours. So hopefully, when I read this series of short stories of yours, that will be echoed even further. So take a minute and tell us what was the impetus behind this collection of works by you?
Well, I mean, this was kind of what I was talking about at the US event about a year ago now, I suppose. I mean, the U.S. event, I was talking about this idea that everything is in America, and America is kind of the center of, I mean, I guess existence. I guess everything. I don't mean to. You know, I'm not here to be mean to Europeans. I'm not like one of those people who takes pride in the fact that America currently has Europe under military occupation. I mean, but it is what it is. I step over what exists. There's good and bad with that, but really, you know, just from a realpolitik sort of view, America's the center of everything. But I don't think just in the sense of realpolitik. I think also in the sense that it's like one of the only places where you'll find a healthy metaphysical view of existence. It's one of the only places in the world where you're not going to find just rampant atheism. Matter of fact, the atheism of the United States is much more pronounced and visible because it is not normal.
Yep.
Because there is so many. I mean, you go to the South and you still have all these, various denominations. Baptists.
Yep.
Pentecostals are a bit weird. I kind of give them
we got some Pentecostals and some apostolics that are a little on the strange side around here.
Yeah, they do strange things.
But you're right about the South, though, especially Appalachia, because around here, being some kind of Christian is just as important as speaking English in most ways.
Yeah, and they don't get to, I mean, they don't get to, what how should I say? Well, I had something I was going to say and I completely forgot it. I apologize, but yeah, I mean, yeah, the United States has a healthy metaphysical outlook, and the United States, that's because the United States, was founded upon religious principle. I know it's kind of trite to say,
but it's true though.
Yeah, it was founded. Like the whole mythos, the whole founding mythology of the United States is the city on the hill. That's like the idea. That's the whole idea of it, and it comes from, I think it comes from one of Jesus's sayings in the Gospels. I could be completely wrong. I don't know the Bible like that, but it's like the phrase "a city on a hill cannot be hid," and it's this idea that it's like we're going to, over here, away from everyone, build the most godly, trusting, amazing expression of European Christianity that you will ever find on earth. And
sort of like an improved Europe 2.0, sort of.
Yeah, basically using that as a common stock. I've recently, I've had the take, just as a small aside, before I even, I mean, this all kind of leads into why I wrote the work, but I've made the take on, my disputes with AA on his show and with, other people before I kind of stepped out of that entirely. I made the statement that America is another European country, but I'm starting to think that maybe that's not the case. I'm actually, even looking at it almost, I mean, much as I've kind of distanced myself from Spengler recently. I mean, everyone, no one, if he's the first thinker you've read, you've always kind of subconsciously look at things still the way you looked at when you read him. So part of me thinks that America is almost at least a nascent, separate civilization from Europe. It comes from a European founding stock, practices the European confessions of Christianity, speaks a European language, which we're speaking right now, dresses in a semi-European style, uses European laws and European technology and European forms of government. But really, like we kind of made it our own. And this may be getting into too much frontier thesis, but it's like this idea, America's just something different. Yep. America's something different. And, and there are vestiges. There's a lot of vestiges of that sort of old world sentiment. But, I was watching,
I definitely think we had our own unique origin of ethnos, and we are something different. We are a new breed of, that's why I like to call America Europe 2.0. We definitely come from the Christendom of Western civilization from Europe. We definitely come from that. But spiritually and physically here in America, we've done something different. We're cutting a new path, so to speak.
Yeah, we're the fruit of European Christianity. Is the fruit of Christendom, I guess you could say, is the best way.
That's a good phrase. Yeah, I like that.
We're the fruit of Christendom, and we go on, and anyone who knows anything a little bit about plant biology, every fruit, a flower is at least I think a flower is technically a fruit, because all a fruit is the reproductive organs of a plant, and it has the seeds in them. And so the fruit always contain the seeds for the next plant, right? So if Europe is one big oak tree, we're the seeds of that oak tree that spread, and we're another one. As a matter of fact, there's a legendary oak both within English mythology oaks play a large part of Germanic folklore generally, just going back to Aryan times, and that's a long time ago. But the United States, even, specifically, I wrote about this on the Old Glory Club Substack, but the state of Connecticut has a legend of the charter oak, which was the oak where I don't want to get too much into off topic here, but this actually, believe it or not, this exists within my short stories. But when the New England colonies were first organized in the early to mid 1600s, when the Stuarts took over the throne, or when James II succeeded his brother Charles II, this is after the English Civil War. James tried to take all of these like independent colonies that were like little European you had Plymouth Bay, or no, Massachusetts Bay, Plymouth, forgive me, Massachusetts Bay, Plymouth, Connecticut. You had all of these like little tiny, even smaller than the New England states are now. But with its sort of homogenizing, with this sort of modernistic homogenizing force, because this is about the time when things like divine right and rationalism and the early Enlightenment were starting to take hold in Europe. All of these European monarchs were trying to destroy all. They were trying to homogenize, basically, and this is homogeneity is a ongoing thing. It's not unique to the 20th or the 19th or even the 18th. You can even find it starting in the 17th and even earlier. So all of these like these thousand sort of. Thousand is a hyperbole, but all these New England colonies were tried to homogenize into one sort of royal authority in what was called the Dominion of New England. And King James dispatched a gentleman by the name of Sir Edmund Andros, I think. I want to double check that, but if I remember correctly, Edmund Andros, that's correct. And he completely, he went out and he was given royal authority and all that. And one of the things he did was go around to all of these like small New England colonies and take their colony charters. Because that's sort of like, it's the same way the Constitution is sacred in the United States. It's like, it's this founding document that it ceremonially brought this place into being legally. And so having possession of that is very symbolically powerful, and it's something that he wanted to do. But when he got to Connecticut and he was at night in the second floor of a tavern, he was about to take the charter, but the candles in the room were sniffed out, and the colonists rushed it over to a window, handed it to a dude who was waiting below the window. The dude grabbed the charter and ran from the tavern to a very, very large oak tree, which no longer stands. It was blown down in a storm in the mid 1800s before the Civil War, and hid it in that oak tree, and it remained in there forever, and they never took it out, and that's why it's called the Charter Oak. And
interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that's, as a matter of fact, that's on the back of the Connecticut Quarter. Whenever
that's fantastic.
And I wrote a whole article on this. Yeah, Esoterica Americana is found in a lot of places, but basically, the whole point I told that story is that America has all of these like quasi-European. The royal oak is the direct comparison in British mythology, where during the English Civil War, the future King Charles II hid in that oak after his father was executed, when they weren't Republican at that point, parliamentarian soldiers were looking to arrest him and execute him, and he hid in that tree, and that was the royal oak. But in essence, this is the sort of stories that found America, and it's kind of like you take certain themes of earlier Europe, and you kind of change them a little bit, and that's kind of, that to kind of transition into sort of talking about why I wrote these stories. What Shakespeare. Okay, I'm big into Shakespeare. When I went into Millennial Woes, I did Millennial. When I had my Millennial appearance, I talked about, other people were talking about all sorts of politics and doing stuff in real life, and that's all well and good. That's, but I went on there and I talked about Shakespeare. I talked about Milton's Paradise Lost, and I talked about the King James Bible. Those are the three things I talked. Which are the three foundation. I said this on AA. The three foundation texts of the United States. America was founded on the complete works of Shakespeare, John Milton's Paradise Lost, and the King James Bible. Those are the three books. If you want to understand what America is, you have to read those three books. Although one of them, it's not so much three books as it is three libraries, but I digress.
Yeah.
But what Shakespeare kind of did to the English people when he was writing his great plays and he was kind of creating the English language out of nothing, he almost created this pagan, this sort of pagan history, this pagan past for the English people that they could kind of longingly look towards as a sense of who and what they were. But he did it in such a sense that the stories were universal and could be told anywhere. And that's what's remarkable about Shakespeare. And in many senses, England as a concept when Shakespeare was writing didn't really have a pagan history. I mean, you had the Anglo-Saxons, sure, who were pagan in their own respect and had their own sort of pagan lore, and a lot of it was destroyed during the Middle Ages by fires and other just general, time being what it is.
Yeah.
It only really survives in a couple of poems and Beowulf and other things like that. So you can't really point to that and say, because that's more or less a dead culture. You can't point to that. That's been completely lost. You can't point to that and say, oh, well, that's the glorious pagan past. Now there is some stuff to be drawn from it, but it's just nothing left there. The Normans who conquered the Anglo-Saxons, well, they were Vikings too. They were Vikings that settled the north of France, and they had their own Germanic past, but that's not, they kind of ceased being that. They were more or less Frenchmen at that point, right? And you can't look. And the Celts are always the Celts. They're doing their own thing. They're not what England is. But basically, when the Normans conquered the Anglo-Saxons, which the great work about that is Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. That's I'd say the single best fictional work of that period.
Oh, I've read that. I read that when I was young. I remember that.
Yeah, it is. It's a book. It's a book young men usually read. It's one of those great, like The Three Musketeers. That's one of those great works of adventure literature that is actually, I really think, is high literature. A lot of people will cast aspersions at adventure literature, but I very much like it.
I think adventure literature is very important, especially in an era where I guess you could say the paths to adventure for young men have basically been eradicated.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that. Not just be. I just think there's all sorts of possibility, and I think the possibilities of adventure are still there. It's just not in the ways that we used to have them, not in the ways that we used to understand them.
I think that's what I meant when I said that.
Yeah.
It's important to give people that are young, especially young men, an inspirational tale to encourage them to go look for paths to adventure and greatness. I think that's important because it's not the way that we live now is very different from how our people have lived for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and we're going to have to adapt.
It is, and it is in some ways, and it isn't in some other ways. But that's kind of beyond the pale. I mean, the great thing about these sort of adventure literature stories is that yeah, you're right, is they kind of give you this idea that adventure is possible, and that's largely, I mean, when I first joined the military, I was big into adventure literature, and I mean that kind of fueled my young man's dreams of martial valor and stuff like that. But and that of course went where it did. But the thing is like kind of backing up a little bit. I mean, Walter Scott and this adventure literature tradition comes from this English literature tradition that was started with Shakespeare, because when the Normans conquered the Anglo-Saxons, they both kind of, I don't want to get into Hegelian dialectics, but they both kind of became one thing. They synthesized into what we now know as the English. Mm-hmm. And England, even though England was created, the Kingdom of England was created by Alfred the Great in about a century and a half before William the Bastard conquered them. Still, this idea of like this England as separate from both the Norman past and the Anglo-Saxon past needed its own kind of mythological, historical chronicle. And the thing is, before Shakespeare, everyone knows now. Everyone's like, oh, well, it does. It has, Henry V and Richard III and the Wars of the Roses and the 100 Years' War and the Crusades and the anarchy and all of these other things. And I'm like, well, yeah, but like that was all just stuff floating around that Shakespeare kind of, our image of it is Shakespeare's image of it. That didn't exist in people's minds until Shakespeare kind of came along, took this grand past and mythologized it. You know, made it in the most popular plays during Shakespeare's time weren't the dramas everyone knows about. It was Henry V. It was, you know, the Merry Wives of Windsor. It was the really easy ones, the easy to digest ones, because the public back then is the exact same as the public today. They like quick and easy stuff that's simple, and they really love these sort of like historical dramas about how great, you know, the English people are and how we really kick those Frenchies at Agincourt and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, you know, when I say he created a pagan history, I mean he created a sort of glorified mythological history that at the same time was also high literature. And he wasn't the only one to do. He wasn't even the only one to do this at the time. Miguel de Cervantes kind of does this with Spain. You know, Don Quixote being the sort of great epic of modern Spain. People like the poem of the Cid is kind of fills that role a little bit better, but like you know, Cervantes fills a similar role as Shakespeare does in Spain. Luis Vaz de Camões in Portugal also does the same with the Lusiads. I could keep going into this. Some countries had them sooner, some countries had them later.
I read some of the Adventures of Don Quixote when I was younger. They were fun.
Yeah, they are. You know, they're kind of like, you know, these sort of national authors. Every nation has its one great author that kind of almost wrote the nation into being. I mean, with Germany, it's just Goethe. Goethe was everything. As a matter of fact, Goethe wrote so much good fiction that for the next like 100 years, no German author could write like fiction. The Germans have this saying: "The first farmer to the field reaps the whole harvest," and that's kind of what Goethe did. He was, I don't want to go off on him, but you know, he's where this sort of Faustian man idea comes from, because he wrote Faust. But I could just keep pointing Italy as Dante. But the United States, the thing about the United States is that we don't really have a consensus as to who our great writer is. There isn't really one. Now, we do have a consensus as to who our like regional great writers are.
Like Samuel Clemens.
Yeah. Maybe. I personally have a great distaste for that man.
No, I meant like names that are big and known and sort of linchpins of culture. He's one that comes to mind. I'm really bad with literature names. It's hard for me to conjure them.
Well, you know, the thing is the United States. I mean, look, yeah, whenever anyone, you know, I think Mark Twain is the great writer of the Union side. For those of you who don't know, Samuel Clemens is the real name of Mark Twain.
Yeah.
He's the great writer of the Union side of things, you know, and some, you know, some great literature professors, even ones I like, say that it was like, you know, what's his freaking name? I always blank out. I know exactly who he was. He was the poet, Walt Whitman. Yeah, everyone says, oh, Walt Whitman is the foundation of the American canon. I personally don't. His poetry's good, but I think that's just a thing of the moment, you know, and it's because he was gay and everyone liked him. Some say it's James Fenimore Cooper who wrote things like Last of the Mohicans, those sort of early frontier novels. I don't think that's the case even. Some people have been recently arguing Nathaniel Hawthorne, who wrote The Scarlet Letter. And
I read that too when I was young. That was on my high school reading list. I remember.
Yes, that. Yeah. These are sort of like I'm kind of running the circuit of sort of the great American, how should I say, the great American authors. But
yeah, Linda in chat brought up Jack London. Is he American?
Yeah, Jack London's another good example.
Is he the Call of the Wild guy?
Yeah, he is. But the thing is that Jack London is still within this sort of James Fenimore Cooper frontier sort of thing. These are all like the good, like if you were to pick the American canon, these are the people that you'll find in it. But America has no one great author. The only one who really comes close is Herman Melville, who wrote Moby Dick. That's the one individual rather that some people are kind of like, more or less like shaking their head one way or another. Okay, maybe it's him. But we do know that we do know who some of the great writers for each individual region of the United States are. For example, the South, the Deep South, their great writer is William Faulkner, unequivocally. It is William Faulkner. Flannery O'Connor is great. Trying to think of other Southern writers. I mean, Robert Penn Warren is great. The Southern Agrarians are great, but it's just the whole Southern canon it's nothing but Faulkner. So he is the quintessential Southern writer, is Faulkner. The quintessential New England writer is also, you could say that one is more difficult to comprehend. Like I said, some say James Fenimore Cooper, some say Nathaniel Hawthorne, some say Herman Melville, some say all these other people. Personally, I'd say Melville takes it for the great New England author. We have the great sort of Texas and Cowboy Southwest author is Cormac McCarthy. He is the quintessential author of Texas. California and the sort of Pacific Coast, it's John Steinbeck. No competition, right? And that's the thing, and I could nitpick and pick individual people for each sort of region of the United States. We've got this one great canonical writer. But I've always believed, and I've kind of tried to make this point, that there is an America. People talk about how America needs to balkanize and break up into a bunch of different states. And, I said this in, on Millennial Woes' stream during Millennial. Mm-hmm. But honestly, I don't think that's, number one, I don't think it's going to happen. Number two, I don't think it should happen. Number three, it's like it. A divided United States means that the anti-white powers of the world no longer have the great power of the world that was founded by us in existence. And so now all of a sudden they have 8 new nations that they can easily just corrupt the founding myths of, and pervert, because, as much as the United States' history has been attempted to be perverted recently, you can't change the truth. And that's kind of why I just, it's one of the various reasons, to say nothing of the material disasters and the economic collapse and the breakdown of civil infrastructure and losing power and unclean water and cholera outbreaks and mass starvation, which would all happen if America were to balkanize. These are just things that would happen.
Yeah, so, I don't advocate for that either, because I think that despite how dark and twisted things might have become and how different the America we have now is from antebellum days, I don't think people who actively seek some kind of secessional collapse understand what it is they're wanting.
Yeah. And that's the thing. No one understands what they're asking for. No one stops and thinks for 5 seconds, hey, what are the consequences of bringing this about?
Not to mention what outside powers could do to us in that situation.
I mean, outside and inside too. But
but regardless, I could talk to you about this kind of stuff all day, but I want to talk to you about your book. And we've had half the stream now talking about what has led you to this book. Now let's move towards the book itself and what it is and why it is.
Yes. I apologize. I can really get this going. I mean,
you're fun to talk to. I could gab with you for hours, but.
Well, I mean, the kind of final point was kind of leading me to my sort of grand conclusion, was there is, not only are there regional American cultures, the South, New England, all these other places, but there is a sort of wider American culture that is not what people say. A lot of people say it's blank worship and, blank control and other things like that. Like, that's American culture. No, obviously not. No, as a matter of fact, the individuals in question would like you to believe that is American culture. No, American culture, there is an American culture that is all overarching. It's in all 50 states. It's in every locality in all 50 states. And it's more than the sum of its parts. You can go anywhere in America and you're farther than Europe exists, and you're still talking to people who are more or less just like you. And that, as far as I know, as far as I think, doesn't yet have a mythology. And that's the reason why I wrote this series of short stories, is because it is the first entry into my attempt at what I believe is a fitting American mythology.
The two things that come to my mind about American mythology that I remember when I was a little kid is I was told the story of Paul Bunyan. I was told the story of Johnny Appleseed, and there was another one that I can't quite conjure. Oh, Casey Jones in the Coast to Coast Railroad story.
Mhm.
Those are three American myths that I remember from being a little kid, but I can't conjure anymore.
Well, there's did you say John Henry?
No, John Henry. That's another one. I remember. Yeah,
Yeah,
John Henry. That's four that I can remember from childhood that are like mythological stories that are unique to America.
yeah. Well, I mean, there's John Henry, but then there's also the Great Frontiersman. There's Davy Crockett and Jim Bowie. There's the Alamo, which has its own mythology.
Yeah.
Like the regional mythology of these, even the Union and Confederate generals, mostly the Confederate generals like Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee, have their own sort of mythological weight to them. And the
Yeah.
whole Civil War is almost coded in this. Like, you read about it and you read what happened, you're like, holy shit, this is like, this whole thing is coded with so much metaphysical significance. I can't even, like, you read about characters like Nathan Bedford Forrest who were
Yeah,
like,
he's from Tennessee. I went to a little tiny museum. I think it's just outside of Nashville. It wasn't a school trip. I think it was a church trip when I was a kid because I went to a Christian school, and we had to learn about Nathan Bedford Forrest and the KKK and all that. And it was very interesting because the people that taught it to us did so with sort of even keel, just telling us the facts and what was known instead of like making it modern and politicized. It was a good time. It was a good time.
If you want a good, real quick before I keep going on the book, if you want a really good biography of Nathan Bedford Forrest, check out Andrew Nelson Lytle's Bedford Forrest and His Critter Company. He was one of the Southern agrarians I mentioned earlier. That's the best biography of Forrest you can read. And he kind of characterizes Forrest as this sort of last knight of this sort of Christian warrior civilization, which is a great read. I'm on a stream to promote my book. I've spent 30 minutes not promoting my book, and now I've promoted another book. But no, the thing is like, I wrote these 7 short stories. So these 7 short stories, there's 6 that are listed, and then there's a hidden 7th one. That's a series of vignettes that all build on each other between all of the short stories. So basically, in order to keep understanding what's happening, you have to read all 7 stories or all 6 stories. You have to keep going. All of these stories have similar themes. They all hit on they all hit on similar sort of they all hit on similar chords, and they're all set in Virginia. So the reason I set them all in Virginia, and a lot of my novels that I have planned are also set in Virginia, and this is because I'm doing this very consciously. Virginia was where America began. It's not just because it's my home state and that I know it the best, even though it is my home state and I do know it the best. Virginia is also, I have this historical thesis about Virginia, that everything that happened in Virginia from about 1607 to about 1776 is the history of the United States. The history of the United States is just a perpetual replaying of the history of Virginia in different places with different people and different results. Including the Civil War. Look at Bacon's Rebellion. So basically, if I can mythologize the state of Virginia and Virginia's history and this sort of grand Virginia idea as something sort of older and separate from the wider South, which is what Virginia is.
Mm-hmm.
If I can mythologize that, then I can scale it up and attempt to mythologize the entire United States.
Yeah.
And so this is just my first attempt to bring about something like that. And if you look at the cover here, the cover has scenes from all 7 short stories that I wrote.
Let's embiggen this so we can have a closer look.
Yes. So
all right. So here we got some witches on the left. We've got a sort of Titan-esque plant man in front of a world here. We've got what looks like church spires over on the right, maybe some people going to a funeral or a wedding, something like that. Why don't you tell us about this a little bit?
Yeah, so these are 3 separate stories. The one on the left, this is the story, The Taps of Old Westmoreland, and it's about a witch finder who's come from Connecticut, actually, who's come from New England down to Virginia to hunt down a coven of witches. In the center, that's the story Old Man Mountain, which is a sort of tall tale. It's a tall tale about, how the world was made, how Virginia was made by a bunch of giants running around, and how the world was made with the blood of giants. On the right, that's the collected sort of, that's the collected vignettes. All the vignettes center around this church and the people that go into the building of this church. All these vignettes display basically the building of this church by a bunch of French Huguenots in a settlement west of Richmond.
Okay. And then lower down here, we've got what looks like a typical go out and slay the dragon type of story. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so it's not that's the Dragon of Skyline. So that individual right there with shining armor on, that is the hero of an ethnos I placed in this story in the northern Shenandoah Valley. I call the Deichers, the Deichmen. They're basically Mennonites. They're the sort of descendants of Rhineland Germans who settled in the Shenandoah Valley in the early 1700s and before. And so this is kind of their founding myth, is this great hero who comes out of their people to go out and slay this dragon that's terrorizing the Mennonites, these German Mennonites.
Well, that sounds fun. I can't wait to read that one. That sounds like my kind of story.
Yeah, I like, I've been complimented. For those who've read it, they've said they've liked it. In the center there, that's the Bard of Stanton. There's,
I was going to say, he looks
cultures.
like a scald. He looks like a scald.
He is, yeah. See, there are cultures in Shenandoah Valley. There's the Deichers, the Mennonites, who are the sort of Germanic, Christians, and they live in the Northern Valley. And then as the further south you go, when the mountains start getting closer together and tighter, and the forests start getting thicker, you've got what I call the Valleymen, and these are in essence the Scots-Irish. All right.
Okay.
And so the Bard of Stanton centers around a young man, a young bard participating in the Valleyman Games at near the Natural Bridge, which is a very metaphysically significant natural wonder that both exists in real life and in my mythos in the Shenandoah Valley.
Beautiful.
And all of these, and so every year the Valleymen get their clans together and they compete in these great games. And this bard is against his will, he's kind of thrown up into a circumstance that he had no control over, and he needs to perform with sort of the weight of the world resting on his shoulders.
All right, let's scroll on down to the bottom of the cover then. Tell us about these gentlemen on horses here.
So that is that's the story Martinsville's Last Race. For those of you who don't know, the city of Martinsville, Virginia, is the center to a big, well, I mean, not compared to the other ones, but compared to the smaller ones, to a NASCAR track that's been on. It's the oldest contiguously used track on the NASCAR schedule, called Martinsville Speedway, and it's an old short dirt track that was then paved over, and is still, it's the tightest, most close quarters race that you can find on the NASCAR schedule. And so that I love NASCAR, and I think it's a big part of the American mythology.
It certainly is.
And so the story, Martinsville's Last Race, is about a scholar who gets thrown out of his college because he becomes too obsessed with the history and the mythology of these great, chariot racers who raced all across old America. And he pursues that myth, those myths, those dreams, all the way to Martinsville, where he finds the old speedway. And so these are all the stories that that kind of take place in my A Country Squire's notebook. It's the first attempt at mythologizing Virginia. All of these hit on a different aspect and all of these have a different aspect of like real life culture, real life Virginian culture. All of these have shards of things in the real world, of real history, of real thing. That's why I like my mythology, because a great mythology is something you can go out and touch. You can go out and see. You can go out and feel. You can, all of the locations that are in my stories, you can go visit if you're in the state of Virginia. You can go visit all of these locations. You can go You can go to Martinsville. You can see a race at the Speedway there. You can go to the old French Huguenot settlement. It's called Mannequin Town, west of Richmond, and you can see the church they built. It's still standing. You can look at the mountains and think to the Blue Ridge Mountains and the rivers and the hills and think to yourself, maybe giants did make these. You can
Yeah.
go up to the Tidewater of Virginia and see the swampiness and the all the creeks and the rivers. That's the thing about the Tidewater. It's got, I think, more creeks and rivers per capita than I think anywhere else on the East Coast. I could be wrong there, but it's like the Chesapeake Bay and its surrounding area is probably one of the wettest regions on the East Coast, which is a really wet region. I may just be pulling that statistic out of my ass, but if you look at a map, it's just thousands of rivers and creeks and streams and all that other stuff. That's why there are so many plantations there, and they were all built so quickly, is because you just had all of these streams, and they just made travel up through the three necks of Virginia and the eastern shore,
And good for farming too, because you didn't have to irrigate much with water so plentiful.
Exactly, and that's why you just had this whole plantation aristocracy in the Tidewater kind of come out of nothing over the course of like 100 years, maybe.
Is the artist of this cover a public someone public, or is this a private?
Yes,
artist?
As a matter of fact, this was done by our good friend Luth Templar / Cringewalker, who.
Oh well, he did an excellent job. I thought that might be his work because of the colors. The color palette reminded me of his work.
Yeah, it is his sort of work, and this isn't, he used a lot of AI art generation, but the way he does it isn't just like AI art. He has his own style to it. He uses like 8 or 9 different generators and his own photoshopping skills and his own drawing skills to make something completely unique. No AI on its own could have generated this book cover.
Yeah, he talked to me. We did a stream together just a month or so ago to talk about his art style and why he was making it. And he uses the AI art generation, in my opinion, like it should be used. It's a collating tool of assembling visual imagery to help the artist rapidly assemble a bunch of different sort of tests or drafts of different visual compositional ideas that then are the inspiration for the finished piece.
It's just a really, really sophisticated and complicated paintbrush. That's all it is.
Yeah.
That's all it is, folks. All right.
It's not going to replace humans. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Like, that's the thing. Like, AI, as we talk about it, algorithms and stuff like that, it doesn't replace anything that's like genuine. It's another tool for those who are truly creative, who are truly, talented to kind of utilize. And that's why I don't have any problem with having that be my cover. It came out excellent.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It came out lovely.
Wonderful cover. Yeah.
I also want to do a big shout out to Dora. Dora did the text work on the cover. Cringewalker did the art. Dora did the text, and I think
the text work is top notch.
Yes, I think they go together very, very, very well. And just to kind of let the audience know, it is only available right now in e-format. It is only available on Vis-a-Vis Gumroad. You are essentially buying a PDF that is all my text. If the run of this book, if people show a lot of interest in this book, I'll see if I can. I've thought about doing a print run. The reason I didn't do it this way is because print runs cost a decent amount of money to print out the book and to ship and to all these.
Do you know my
things.
friend Dave Martell, who runs the Bizarchives? You know him?
Yes, I do. Yeah, as a matter of fact, Arbogast on his Substack wrote a review of this collection of short stories, and I really appreciate them for doing that.
Yeah, if I don't know a lot about book production, but I know that Dave is a very busy small-time creator publisher, and he's published and sold thousands of copies under his publishing label. So he might could help you get this circulated, at least in America.
Yeah, if he's listening to this, if this ever reaches his ears, I'd be more than happy to talk to him. I mean, I'm subscribed to his Telegram channel. I've talked to him maybe once or twice in a Telegram chat. He's not a bad dude. I mean,
no, he's pretty cool. I like him a lot. He's his mission statement is making fiction about what regular dudes like again. Because when you think of all the pulp fiction of the last 100 years, whether it's comic books or magazines, all the way up to like Heavy Metal magazine or dime novels, he wants to make fiction by our people, for our people, and by our people, I mean, like, regular, just working class American folks. Like, he wants to to bring good fiction to them again. And he does a podcast. He'd probably even have you on to talk about the book, like I'm doing right now, if you ask him.
I might do that actually. Because like I really do believe in this. I wouldn't be here saying, hey, I want you all to buy this book, not because it supports me, although it does support me, and I very much appreciate support that y'all would give my way. Small little side note: the price itself is also kind of a part of the artisticness of the book.
I
It's
noticed that. I was going to ask you about that. Let's go ahead and talk
yeah.
about it now. As you guys can see, it is 1607. Now, why
Yes,
might have you have chosen that number?
so it's $16.07. Yes. I mean, I was talking to someone. I didn't know what I wanted to sell it for. And in an ideal world, I would have just given it out for free. When if I had everything taken care of. But when you do something of this undertaking, especially when you're at my age, I mean, it's foolish not to ask something for it.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, if this succeeds and people are willing to do shit, like maybe the next one will be free. Maybe I'll have some free content interspersed with the larger stuff. But it's like, I was talking to someone and he told me I should price it because he read the stories and he knew the amount of work that was put in them. And he told me, I should probably price these around maybe $15. And
I was ready and willing to pay 1776 for it.
No, I'm saving that for something else.
Okay.
No, but like, if any work of art, even the price point that you sell it at, if you have control over it, can be a part of the art as well. And for those of you who don't know, 1607 was the year Virginia was founded, and the year that the whole Anglo-American, Germanic-American project began.
That's basically the starter point of the ethnos of America.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
Kind of getting back to that. A point I wanted to make earlier is that what differentiates American from European is the concept of being white. That is an American concept.
Yeah,
that is an American concept because America was basically one big PvP server for a good 200 years of its history.
Mm-hmm.
And basically it was us versus the red man. And then we had, in some places you had the black man that also kind of needed to be kept a side eye on. So basically it was the place where it didn't matter. And this is part of the reason why we kind of had weak defenses, against certain snakes in the grass.
Yeah. We're on YouTube, so our certain weakness, let's just say, being led by the nose.
Yeah, yeah, something like I try to use euphemisms. I think I've been doing a good job so far. But like that's why we were and Francis Parker Yockey talked about this. Like these kind of people, we didn't really know they existed. Most Americans didn't really know they existed, despite being like literate in the body. They just simply did exist, and they didn't realize there were so many large populations of them. But anyway, I digress. But no, America was basically just one big PvP server. It was you had literal, I don't know if I should say this word. So there are certain King Philip's War was a war of extermination between the red man and the white man. That was the one time, and that's the founding. This is why I'm not hard on. I don't hate Yankees. I don't hate New England. I don't really, I'm not in any position to hate any region of the U.S. because I speak Mid-Atlantic English with certain inflections on my words. But King Philip's War was a war of extermination where, for probably the once and only time in American history, the red men could have won, and it came really close. That was like, and that's what kind of created this sort of Puritan, super stiff, like perfectionist, morally kind of busybody culture, is because they literally fought a war of existential survival in the dead of winter against a marauding foe.
Yeah.
Only their sort of scant few walled settlements hugging the coast as like these lights of civilization. And the Europeans noticed that in order to survive, they had to get as savage as the enemy they were fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And the Europeans were kind of shocked and appalled by this, and that's when they sort of start to see as like, oh, those people in America may be somewhat related to us, but they're different. They're almost animalistic would be the word they would use. But no, and similar things, lots of similar, the Jamestown massacre in 1620, which no one talks about. Um, the Jamestown massacre, things happened in the South too. You
Yep.
know, like this happened all across the United States. These were existential struggles that kind of defined what America would be, and I think really started to separate it as a concept from Europe, because you had no place for foppish aristocrats who couldn't fight, or at least who fought in like and I'm not saying they couldn't fight, but they fought in these very attritional sort of open, that's not to say the wars European aristocrats fought in weren't terrible. They were absolutely terrible. Look at the 30 Years War.
Yeah.
Look at the Pike and Shot Wars. They were brutal. But the thing is that they couldn't fight that kind of war in America. In America, if you were an aristocrat, we did have plenty of them, but you also needed to be a colonel in the militia, and you needed to know how to lead troops in battle. And you needed to fund the sort of local ranger detachment that went and patrolled the backcountry and the wilderness to try to anyway, I don't mean to die, but like all of these have themes that kind of play into these stories. Is that it's almost like I'm trying to breathe this life into this old American history, these little niches of history that aren't really esoteric at all. It's just America's so freaking big that there's no way anyone can know even parts about their hometown. People learn, I learn new things about my hometown all the time.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Yeah, and it's like, and so it's like I feel like there's a hungering for this sort of thing. I feel like people want to see it, and I want to see if I can get it to a quality. Not to say pulp is bad. As a matter of fact, Robert E. Howard is one of my favorite authors and one of my bigger influences. You'll see all of these stories in this book. You could pick an author, one individual author who has influenced these stories more than anyone else. But like, I want to see if I can take this concept of like mythologizing and bring it up to the level of high literature. That's what I want to do.
That would be awesome, and I think you can. Like, you're a very talented young man. You've got a great mind. You're good with words. I'd like to see you become a great writer of the mythology of our ethnos, of our people here in America.
Yeah, and I mean that's the goal. Whether or not I can do it, time will only tell. But that is indeed the goal. I've got to. I mean, I feel like I can rest on my laurels for a little bit because now I have something that's out. I know what the next book I'm going to write is. As a matter of fact, I don't mean to make this claim, but make it seem that it's boastful. But I know every single story that I'm ever going to write in this mythos from beginning to end, with more or less every single character in them and every scene that takes place in my
Awesome.
head. Like this isn't like I'm not writing a fantasy universe that doesn't have a beginning and an end. I'm not just like, this isn't here, to keep the never ending story going, no, I have a set schedule of, I kind of have a release order in my head that may or may not get tweaked, but the release order is not the same as the chronological order. As a matter of fact,
okay,
the chronologically first book will be the last book I ever write.
Okay.
And
Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to kind of be my, Tolkien's a big influence. Tolkien tried to do this for, England, and I really think he did succeed. He really did succeed. I actually think that the cure for modernity, the cure for all of our problems, and the reason, I get on people for quoting Lord of the Rings too much, but I mean, I love Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
I
mean,
absolutely
well,
love
people
it.
quote Shakespeare a lot, and it's critically important for having a mythological foundation of ethnos. And I think that Tolkien, in a lot of ways, is maybe just as important to people today.
Yeah, and the thing is with it, like, I'm not here to disparage any sort of great right-wing authors, but I think we've kind of gotten too lost in the politics, or in these like weird, strange abstractions of thought. I know everyone makes fun of Evola and Guinan and all those now, and me included. And I don't mean to make fun of them again. It's they've got some decent stuff in them, but at the same time, not really anything that you can't find anywhere else better written. But like, if you want to be a true like based right wing bearer of culture who wants to care about your ethnos, how about you actually like write or read, not write later, but read first.
Mhm.
How about you read what your ethnos did? You know, if I were to recommend one book to every American to give them an idea of what America is, you know, other than those three I outlined earlier, read The Education of Henry Adams. Read that book. That's one of the best, most enlightening books you could ever read about the entirety of like the development of America. It was written
The
by Henry
Education of
Adams.
Henry Adams, you say?
Yeah, The Education of Henry Adams. It was written by
Okay.
Henry Adams, who was John Adams's great grandson. He was John Quincy Adams's grandson. His father, I forget his father's name. His last name was Adams, but he was one of Lincoln's. Yeah, I know I hate Lincoln and I hate Henry Adams's father, but um because they were like the hardcore sort of burn the South to the ground crowd. But like
Yeah,
the
I don't
edu-
like those folks. Those are some
yeah,
bad people.
but don't let that cast dispersions, because Henry Adams was kind of writing in the early 1900s. Matter of fact, one of his best friends was I think Robert E. Lee's either son or grandson when they were at
Oh,
Harvard
okay.
together. But you know,
I like Robert E. Lee.
yeah, and you know, and Robert E. Lee, I said this on an old Glory Club stream. Robert E. Lee, you know, when he was writing to his son at a low point of his career, when he was getting um, stationed in New Mexico, and everyone thought it was going to be a career killer, and he found out his son got in trouble in West Point. Like Robert E. Lee thought that like that was the end of his career, and he wrote his son a letter, and he basically said, you know, he mentions this sort of Puritan. I think I forget his last name, but it was like, you know, in the early American history. As a matter of fact, there's another piece of Esoterica Americana. In early American history, in their like the 1600s, the Connecticut legislature was meeting, and they called it the Dark Day, where basically the sun got blocked out as though it were an eclipse, but it wasn't an eclipse. It's just for some reason the sun got black, and everyone was freaking out. They're like, the second coming is here. The second
Oh,
coming is
wow.
here. And the Connecticut legislature was in session, and there was this one character, I forget his name, but he basically, you know, they were like, "Oh, should we adjourn it if the last day is here?" And he said, "You know, well, if the last day is here, I want the Lord to find me at my place of duty. So I move that we bring candles into the room to continue our business."
Based.
And he and Robert E. Lee brought up that story, told that story to his son who just gotten in trouble at West Point, and he said to his son, "Do your duty in all things. Don't let your mother or I wear one gray hair for lack of duty on your part." And that's kind of how that's the man Robert E. Lee was. That's kind of like what he told his son to do at probably one of the lowest points of his life.
That's very inspiring. It's a good story.
Yeah, yeah, so I mean, for that reason, you know, like the South loved the sort of New England Puritan culture as an example of what duty was, and in many ways, a lot of New Englanders look fondly on the South as like this sort of this great chivalrous knightly. And I'm steel manning both, so it's like, don't let that discourage you from reading The Education of Henry Adams, but you know, read what your ethnos wrote. The Education
Mhm.
of Henry Adams is one of the best outlines of what America is.
Here
I'm
you go,
actually,
shilling other people's books on a stream about your
yeah.
book.
Yeah, I know, but like, I mean, buy my book, please, if you want to read it. If you don't want to read it, that's fine. But if you want to read it and you want to check it out, give it a buy, take a look at it, read through it, read the first story. If you don't like it, that's fine. You know, at least you went and read it. But I really think this is a good series of stories.
Well,
I
I'm
really,
excited to read it. I bought it right before the stream went live, and I'll definitely be letting you know what I think of it once I get some of your stories read. Um, Thank you for being here with me today, Paul. We've come to the
of
end
course.
of the interview. If there's one thing that you can leave with my viewers about why they should have this book and what they'll get from it, what short thing can you say to entice people to get this collection?
Oh, that's a hard one, but I guess I could put
I
it
know
in a
brevity's difficult for you.
yeah. I guess I could put it in maybe one or two sentences. This book is the beginning of what I hope to be the American mythos. And if you buy it now and you read it now, you can say, you know, I mentioned Goethe earlier on stream. You know, Goethe was with the Prussian soldiers right before the Battle of Jena in 1806, when Napoleon destroyed old Prussia forever, and Prussia completely reformed itself into the thing that would then create Germany. And Goethe was with some soldiers around the fire right before they went into battle, and he said to those soldiers, you can all say that you were there the moment that history changed. And so I would say,
Wow.
you know, I would say if you buy and read this book and check it out, you'll be there at the beginning of the writing of the great American mythos.
Well, that inspires me, and I'm excited. I'm fired up. I believe that Americans have a future. I think that we are going to forge a destiny that's better than what we came from. And men like you and your inspiring words are going to make it happen, Paul. Thank you for being here with me today. I highly recommend that you guys all go get this book, check it out. It's available in digital only right now, like you said, but hopefully in the future you can have a hard copy of it. I'm putting the link to it in all the chats again. We don't have any community engagement messages. I refreshed while we were wrapping up there. So we can go ahead and say our goodbyes now, Paul. I look forward to having another stream with you one day, and I wish you the best in all your endeavors, my friend.
Thank you very much, Yiz. I'm happy to come back anytime you'll have me.
All right, sounds great. And I'll see you guys tomorrow night for more Discordant Dragons. Good night, everybody. God bless.
Good night.